Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Freelancers Tea Break, the short and sweet podcast you can enjoy whilst you're enjoying a cuppa. I've just made one, and this week I'm joined by Jo Hooper, who's also raising. Are you on a tea or a coffee?
Oh, tea. I know the cup says coffee, but I just really like this cup and I don't like coffee, so it's got tea in it.
I think it's appropriate to have like this is my favourite cup just because holding it feels really good.
Exactly. The cup has to feel right. Totally with you.
So Jo is a fellow coach, but Jo really specialises in burnout and rebellious life. Well, I'm trampling into your introduction, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and then I'll tell everyone a bit more about what we're going to be talking about today.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so I'm a coach and yeah, I would say I'm like a rebellious business coach and rebellion against the notion that you have to like work your fingers to the bone, rebellion against like patriarchal ideas of people socialized as women should be small, pliant, kind, always say yes, rebellion against capitalist notions that like productivity is the highest value, ableist ideas that if you're not working, you can't earn. Basically, I'm like about subverting all the rules or rules in inverted commas when it comes to life and business. And I guess I do that because I tried to play by the rules for 11 years of my corporate career, and it ended with me having two mental health crises in 18 months and having to leave corporate life forever and figure out how I could live in a healthy way. Um, so yeah, rules ain't my bag.
I think it is. I see this as well with clients sometimes, where especially if they come from super corporate, it takes years of unlearning all of those rules and all those things, and even the I need to work 9 to 5 or I have to work 9 to 5. Like
Hmm.
those are my set hours, and I have to be working all those times. Otherwise, I'm not being a productive human being.
Yeah.
Which is bullshit, really, isn't
I'm so glad that you said bullshit because I just realised that I didn't ask you if we're allowed to swear, and it's kind of like a
it?
core part of my personality.
Yeah, we'll have this as a swearing one.
Okay, great for you. Yes, it is bullshit. And the like what I'm really interested in is what lies underneath those behaviors, beliefs, habits. So the if I'm not working 9 to 5, I'm not a productive human being. So I like to go deeper underneath that and be like, why should I be a productive human being? Oh, because capitalism tells me I should. And what I've found is like underneath all of these kind of unhelpful and at times, frankly, toxic things that we believe are rules or the way that things are systems of oppression, capitalism, patriarchy, white supremacy, ableism. Like they're all that aren't actually rules. They're just belief systems that we've adopted and seen for so long that we believe are rules, but they're not when we unpick them.
And a lot of them are based on even back in the Ford times of like families where it was just the man working, and
Hmm.
that was how they based it. And we're not in that world anymore.
No. So many of these like so many things about the system and the structure of work as an entity were established in the Industrial Revolution when, we didn't have electric lighting and we all worked in factory lines. And so we had to be together between the hours of daylight. And that's not the way the world is anymore. And yet we still see those ways of working, rules around what work is, continuing both in the employed and the self employed world.
I think, I personally think lockdown had an interesting impact on that, because not only did it force a lot of companies to finally go work remotely, which actually worked for a lot of, I mean, I know a lot of neurodivergent people found it really beneficial, but I think a
Mm.
lot of people in general found it better for work-life balance and things like that, and it forced people to do that. But then we're obviously seeing people still trying to claw people back into the office, even though that's not what's best for the business. It's not what's best for the employees, but it's this I can't let go of how things used to
Yes.
be and
Yes.
how we're programmed.
Yes. I think the whole like I feel like there are so many rabbit holes I could fall down here, but I'll try and fall down one at a time. Um Yeah, I think the pandemic and people being able to work from home, I mean, wasn't there a phrase like basically there was this huge rise in people quitting and going self-employed because they realized that they could work from home and live a different life, and there was huge benefit in that for many people. I did quite a lot of work with people in the pandemic who were wildly overworking because they were living and working in the same space, and like that's still something I see with clients now. And again, like what is underneath that often is, for freelancers and self-employed people particularly, it's often I have to say yes to all the work while it's here because otherwise it'll all disappear.
Yeah.
Or it's the kind of capitalist, well, I should be productive, so I may as well work, which is just like designed to make us subordinate ourselves to work. And like, why the hell are we working if not to like give ourselves the life that we want?
I think it's interesting. As a freelancer, you are paid for the work you do, not the hours you do necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Like you might be paid hourly, but I found whenever I worked in an office job, you're kind of clocking in and clocking out and doing the hours. Whereas when you are being paid to on the based on the results essentially more than anything
Mm.
else, it does change how you work, but it also makes you realize how much more productive you can be in 3 or 4 hours of solid working on something rather than 8 hours of dipping in and out of meetings and chit chat with people. I mean, socializing is good, but I can't bear too much small talk, so it was so unproductive. Um, yeah, it's really fascinating how everything has changed in the last few years,
Mm.
um, but also just the unlearning that we have to do.
Yeah, and just to like pick up on what you said there about, how much more productive you can be in 3 or 4 hours rather than 8 hours peppered with meetings and bobbins asking if you want a coffee. Although, sometimes bobbins, yes, I would like a cup of tea. Um, but this is why, for me, the rule or the notion or the traditional way of trading time for money just does not work, because as you get better at something, you're penalized and you're paid less.
Yeah,
So like I evangelize about project based work or package based work, or essentially work based on outputs and outcomes rather than the time that you spend doing the thing, because otherwise the better you get, the less you're paid for it. Totally doesn't make any sense.
yeah, I'm completely on board with that message as well because it's just, as you said, why would you penalise yourself for getting better at something? And also, I think when you do it hourly, it's really easy for a client to get a bit picky, like, what was that hour
Mm-hmm.
for? What was that hour for? Rather
Yeah.
than just basing it on what the results are.
Yeah. And what that does is it wonks the power dynamic. Like, I'm providing you with a service. I have autonomy over how that service is provided and when I set the rules, essentially. But when you start going on the hour and the client's like, oh, don't you just have like half an hour left of that hour block? Or like, it's not that the power dynamic is thrown off essentially, and it replicates the power dynamic in an employed relationship or an employed setup where, yeah, you went for an extra long wee, so you've got to make up half an hour at the end of the day. Like, bleh, no.
Yeah, and the can you just tasks end up slipping in.
Blah, blah,
Whereas
blah,
if you're
blah.
on a project or a package, you're like,
Yeah.
I can do that, but that's outside what we agreed. Whereas hourly, they'll be like, that'll only take you 5 minutes. Will it though?
Yeah. Also, if it takes me 5 minutes, you should be paying me for the 5 years it took for me to learn how to do it in 5 minutes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And I feel it's really interesting how different we perceive, say, what a plumber does or a builder versus what a maybe a creative freelancer does, like a graphic
Yes.
designer or a social media manager, people like that. And I think this is probably going to dig into what we were going to talk about a bit more in terms of the gender side of things as well, in terms of
Mm,
how we perceive maybe typically male freelance roles against female roles, or even just
mm.
men and women in the same freelance role. I don't know if you've noticed anything around that as well.
I think, and we mentioned this before we started recording, but the phrase, I'm going to go after it like a mediocre white man, like just springs to mind. And I say that very flippantly and with jest, but again, I'm interested in what's underneath that. And what's underneath that is the notion of womanhood. Those of us socialized as women are taught that to be a woman is to be pliant and kind and nurturing and supportive and to say yes. And Glennon Doyle in her book Untamed puts it so painfully well when she says the epitome of womanhood is to be selfless, to lose oneself for other people. And I think I see so much of this with clients and people I work with, that although we can know perhaps that we, whether you identify with the label feminist or not, I'm not a big label person, but we can know that the patriarchy has an impact on our lives, and patriarchal notions of how we should behave and be and think have an impact on our lives. And yet we can still be operating and behaving, particularly in our businesses, in a way that the patriarchy has taught us. And what the patriarchal world that we live in teaches us is that to be safe as a woman, you have to be small, pliant, kind, and all the things that go with it. And what that does is keeps us quiet and poor. And what it does is allows men, mediocre white men, to do what they damn well please and charge as much as they want for it. Whereas women are like worrying about, you know, raising their prices by 5% or 10%, and men are out there doing what they please. Not all men, you know, sure.
No, but it is. I mean, this is so. I'm just going to bring in. By the way, I meant to say as a side note as well. When you said that on the podcast about the selfless thing, I literally pulled over and wrote it down on my phone because
Did
it was just
you?
it really it chimed with me so much. But yeah, so I pulled out a survey that was done very recently, actually in May, by a company called On Deck about USA pay gaps. So I think the pay gap in the USA between men and women for like an employed job was 18%. Freelancers, it's 26%. Um, and to give an example, this was based on Upwork, which there is an element there of
Yeah.
it's a bit trickier, but for men, they on average, and this is across all industries, so it's like a an average across all of them, 75 point 75 pounds, $75 and 40 cents an hour, and for women, it's $59.70 an hour, which is quite a shocking
Mm.
difference, really. Um, and I think some of the reasons behind that you've touched on there a little bit about like sometimes it's the confidence of having
Mm.
of white mediocre man's confidence. What other factors do you think are kind of underpin that, or values or beliefs or anything like that?
Yeah. I think I definitely think you're right in that confidence has a part in it, but I feel like when we say it's about confidence or it's about mindset, we're doing ourselves a real disservice, because this isn't just something that we have developed a limiting belief about. We have been fed, people socialized as women have been fed their entire lives this system of beliefs or notions about what it is to be a good woman. And that includes saying yes to things, putting yourself second or last. It includes not being a bother. It includes not getting too big for your boots, because what happened to women who got too big for their boots 500 years ago? They got named witches and burnt at the stake. Like, and not to take us down another sciencey like stats rabbit hole, but if we know that species have to adapt to survive, and the species of woman spent hundreds of years being shunned, stoned, killed, burnt at the stake for being powerful, outspoken, different, what's going to happen to women after that? They're going to adapt to be smaller, quieter, not stick their head above the
Right.
parapet. That's why it's so hard now for us to go against some of these these adaptations because we're basically, our brains think that we're making ourselves unsafe by saying, no, actually, I won't do that for 50p. No, I'm afraid a third round of revisions cost more money as per the contract. Like, the reason those things feel so hard is because our brains have adapted, or we have, our brains tell us that to be safe, we have to be pliant, kind, nurturing, say yes, selfless. Um, and so I think there's like a whole host, and that's compounded if you're someone with caring responsibilities or who has physical mental health issues or who's a person of color. Like, all these systems of oppression just jumble up on top of one another and we get crushed underneath them. So I feel like there are so many things that go into why it can be so hard for women to charge what they need and want to charge, and to say, to have boundaries around what they do, and to work with the amount of people that they want to, because we've been taught that to do that is to put ourselves in a place of unsafety.
Yeah, I think I have to admit, I generally do prefer working with women because I feel there's an element of safety there.
Mm.
And unfortunately, the times when I've had difficulties with being paid on time, or uh, power dynamic issues
Mm.
has unfortunately been in some of the instances where I've worked with men. It's not, isn't it? I feel like we're both going to go, oh, it's not all men, but it is. Unfortunately, there is more of a trend towards that.
Mm.
Um, and I think it's also interesting how we're seeing a divide in freelancing roles that are seen as women's roles. For
Mm.
example, virtual assistants
Yeah.
roles. And they are so, like, I couldn't do without my team. They are so, so helpful. Um, but it is seen as a woman's role, isn't it? Whereas
Mm.
graphic design, no, actually, I'd say graphic design is more unisex, but there are roles like programmers and things like that that are seen
Yeah.
as more traditional male roles. And I think the pay reflects that, and it shouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. When I've had people I've worked with, I've regularly said to them that you need to charge me more than that. I'm going to pay you more than that because I'm not going to perpetuate women undercharging. Like, in my work, I evangelize about figuring out your capacity first and then setting your prices based on your capacity and the amount of money that you want to earn so that you can earn what you want to earn in the time you want to earn it. And I'm not gonna pay people, I'm not gonna perpetuate people being not paid fairly when I'm paying someone in my business. Um, but yeah, it's really interesting what you say about, um, even in, this relatively new online economy, online small business world, that there are already gendered roles emerging. And again, it just mirrors what we saw in the Industrial Revolution, like the service industry grew after the Industrial Revolution. And what were women's roles? They were secretaries, they were typists, and the men's roles were the more, in inverted commas, powerful decision makers. Um, and it's really sad that we're seeing that continuing in, um, the self-employed and freelance world. But I also think, like, you know, there are so many reasons behind that. Like, I know a lot of, and have worked with a lot of VAs who have caring responsibilities and small people in their lives. And the reason that they set up a VA business was to allow them to do that and have the freedom and flexibility to do it. And so I can totally see why it's a role that's very attractive to someone with caring responsibilities, which often is the woman in a relationship, in a heterosexual relationship. Um, but what I'm interested in is you picking the role that works for you and then subverting any rule that isn't actually a rule to make it work even better for you. So VAs charging what they want and need to charge, having boundaries around their time, not charging based by the hour, making their business actually work for them rather than replicating the structures and systems in the employed world that do not work for us.
I think it's also valuing the. So, have you read a book called Fed Up? I can't remember who the author is.
No.
It's actually more about the distribution of like domestic tasks at home, with the
Mm,
mental load, that kind of thing.
yeah.
And a large part of it was about how men perceive, or society perceives, a lot of those mental load roles as beneath men. So
Mm,
things like washing, cleaning, that's beneath men. And I think the same applies to the like admin tasks
yeah.
are beneath them, but not realizing all those things are the things that keep everything going. And if you don't do all those, if you don't have those foundations in place and have people doing that valuable work, and that is valuable work,
Mm,
and I know in my own business, being able to have a team who supports me has been completely business and life changing for me.
mm,
And it has had more of an impact than perhaps if I'd gone for support from someone in like more of a traditional male role.
mm,
I think it's how we value
yeah.
those tasks, because they might be the small little tasks, but for me as someone with ADHD, they're things that I cannot really get my head around.
Mm.
um but for anybody, I just think we undervalue all those things.
Yes, and like it feels like a chicken and egg thing because I think we undervalue them because they're traditionally female or feminine in
Yes.
inverted
Yeah.
commas things. And to be a female is to be less than a male. And so it's like, what came first? Is it the notion that women are subordinate to men, or is it the notion that these tasks are beneath men? Like it's this horrible reinforcing cycle, which is why we got to burn it down. Also, it makes me laugh about your point about the washing because in my house, when I do the washing, my boyfriend's like, "What are you doing? Why are you putting that in there?" Because he's like a washing like connoisseur, and I'm like, "Oh, just chuck it all in together." Um, we subvert gender roles in our house a lot. I do like zero cooking because if you want to eat things that taste nice, I don't cook it.
Yeah, we've just started using HelloFresh because I am not a good cook at all. But we do have a cleaner as well, purely because that then it equalizes things in our
Yeah.
house. And it's a nice thing that my cleaner is a couple, so I
Oh,
don't feel
that's
like it's a gendered
cool.
role. It's either she's really lovely actually. She either brings her husband or her son, and they
Oh
do
my
it
God, I
together. So
love
that's
her. I love her. She's like raising the next generation of men who keep house nice.
it's yeah, it's really
She needs
lovely.
to make
So
like a franchise business out of that.
I know she's through my agency actually that I use. So I'll have to mention that to her next week then. But yeah, there's so many different things I think that go into that gender issue, or the income issue. But as women, we need money to have that power,
Yeah.
and we need to be able to then invest back in women-led businesses, and yeah, female freelancers or female identifying freelancers. We need to do all of those things. I think Denise Duffield Thomas talks about this a bit, doesn't she?
Mm,
About, I don't know if you've read her stuff, but she talks about, money is power, because then you can then contribute to charities that you want to, or
yeah.
you can make the change. But we
Yeah.
can't make the change if we make ourselves small.
Exactly. And the whole, women are selfless, women are kind, women are nurturing, women say yes, they don't say no, they don't say not like that. All of that is designed to keep women quiet and poor. And quiet and poor don't make change makers. So yeah, I totally agree. Like we we got to earn more to be able to A, live the lives that we want, and B, make the world that we want. And we do that through whatever is right for us, whether that's donating, whether it's donating money or time, whether it's spending your money with people who you believe in, whether it's like creating scholarships within your business, whatever it is. we got to earn the money to be able to do those things. And so we got to charge the money to earn the money, not just because, we want the life that we want, not just because we don't agree with ridiculous, senseless disparity between men and women's earnings, but because we think it's the right thing to do. And I feel like this is probably the topic of another podcast, but there's still such a, not just stigma, but shame around women saying, I want to earn a shit ton of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's almost as if like the next sentence to that is, because I want to buy 20 pairs of Louboutins. Like, and whatever you want to spend your money on is a-okay by me, as long as it's not like, arming war criminals or doing bad shit in the world. You spend your money however you want. But it's like even those of us who say it can't put together the notion that I want to earn a shitload of money, have a nice life, and do good things in the world. Like, it's as if they're mutually exclusive, and they're not. They absolutely go hand in hand.
And this is, I mean, again, this is the new stuff with Thomas. Her book Lucky Bitch was all about, if you're rich, you're a bitch. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I finished reading the book and I went on Pinterest and I started creating a board of women I admire who weren't portrayed in the media as a bitch. And it was challenging. It
I
was
was going to
really
say, where did you
challenging.
find those people?
Yeah, I think in fairness, I did find a lot of them in the entrepreneurial world because there are some that I really admire. But even you can see when some people hit those 6 figures, 7 figures, the way that people talk about them in the
Yeah.
media changes, or the way
Mm.
even like I see it on social media or on forums and things like that. Um, and there are definitely women out there. Like I can't remember her name, the ex-wife of the guy that runs Amazon.
Oh, don't
I can't
know.
remember her name.
Jeff Bezos' ex-wife.
Yes.
Oh, I don't know who that
So I
is.
think she's basically trying to give away as much of the money as possible to charities and
Mm.
causes and foundations. And I think someone had made some kind of comment about how she wasn't giving enough away, so she doubled it or something like that. But I need to read about more about her. I've made a note of her to read more about her because that's what I love to see. I know people will say,
Mm.
well, that's not her money, but well, it kind of is. She did she did half the work yeah, but she's doing good with it, and I think
Mm.
seeing more women being rich and doing amazing things with it
Yeah. Yeah.
is something we need to see more of, but we just don't see it in a positive light.
No. And it's like, it's almost as if women have to do good with their money to justify having the money in the first place.
Oh God,
Like,
yeah, that's a good point.
like women have to be pliant, kind, and nurturing. Also, if you get rich, then you should give all that money away. Like,
Yeah,
no one says that about Stephen Bartlett. No one says that about Jeff Bezos or Warren Buffett. Like,
yeah.
why do they have to do good to justify earning the money that they earn? And like I say, that's not to negate the fact that I personally, when I'm rich, will be, and I already do, and I'm certainly not rich. Like, spend money with people who I know I want to spend money with because I care about their businesses. Spending money locally because I want to support local businesses. Like, we continue to make choices that are true to our values. It's just we get to make bigger, more expensive choices when we earn more money, but we shouldn't have to promise to do good to allow ourselves to earn good money.
Sorry, I've gone into a real thought because you really unlocked that in my brain about the whole. We just think that um, women almost only deserve the money if they're going to give it away and they're going to do good with it and they're going to be selfless.
Yeah,
It goes back to that selfless thing, doesn't it?
exactly. Yeah. To be a good woman, the epitome of womanhood is to be selfless.
Oh,
Why? Why do I have to be selfless? And Bob Smith gets to live his life the way he wants. No thanks. I'd quite like to do that for myself, thank you. But living the life I want is in line with my values, and it is shopping locally. It is spending money with people who I believe are doing good things in the world. Like, we don't have to perpetuate that patriarchal notion of the epitome of womanhood is selflessness when we get rich, just as we don't have to do it when we're earning what we're earning now.
So what's and I'm putting you on the spot here, but so feel free to take a moment to think. But if you could ask, especially female freelancers, if you could ask them to do one thing to rebel more against the system or live that wilder life a little bit more, what would it be?
I think it'd be two things. One is like dream big and admit to yourself what you really want, even if right now you think you're never going to get it, because beliefs take time to build. And if you haven't got evidence that you can get that thing, then your brain is automatically going to be like, well, that's not for us. But try and put that aside for a minute and be like, okay, if there were no constraints, what would I want from my life? And then the practical thing is look at how much you want to work, then look at how much you want to earn, and make sure that you're charging more than enough to earn that money in the time you want to make it. And then do that every year and add a premium. Because otherwise you will always overwork to make the money that you want to earn, never mind exceed the money that you want to earn.
That I have to rewind that afterwards and make a big note of that one. So there are lots of places we can find you online, and you've also got a very excellent freebie, which is the How to Run a Rebellious Business freebie. So where can we find you online?
Yeah. So I probably spend most of my time online on Instagram, where I'm Get Wildly Free. And yeah, you can get my free video about how to run a rebellious business on my website. It's just getwildlyfree.co.uk/links.
And you've got a podcast as well?
Oh yeah, I've also got a podcast called Get Wildly Free too. She loves everything being the same name.
Well, no, it's good. It's very good. It makes it much easier. And yeah, I've really been enjoying the podcast. So I think they're very short and sweet, like this podcast as well, usually. When we have guests on, it's slightly longer, but yours are lovely and short and sweet. So if you like this podcast, I think you'll very much like Joe's podcast as well. Thank you so much for coming on. I feel like there's probably lots more rabbit holes we could have gone down. So we might have to revisit this at a later date. And if anyone wants to know a bit more about any of this, I'm going to put all the details in the chat. I'll also put in the link to the study I found about the stats between male and female freelance rates in America. It'd be great to see one in the UK, so I'll have to see if maybe ITSE are going to do something on that. And thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful week. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks for having me.